retired public officer, having worked with the National Treasury for over 41 years as an internal auditor. And in the process, the government trained me as an anti-fraud expert. A CAV is the qualified forensic auditor. Most of the people talk about forensic audit, but what is it? The word forensic means anything to do with the courts, legal. In a proper forensic audit aims at establishing 4 elements. One is the fraud scheme. You gather evidence to prove this is the fraud which was committed or the crime which was committed. 2, the cost of that fraud. How much did it cost? How much was defrauded? Again, you must gather evidence to prove that is the amount of what was defrauded. 3 is the perpetrator of that fraud. Again, you gather evidence to prove this is the person who defrauded the money. 4, who is the victim? So this is a certification, an international certification given by the association, the Global Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, which is headquarters in Texas. Here in Kenya, we have a chapter, and I'm a former president of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners.
Wow. Thank you for that, Dr. Wahome.
Yes.
Come back to you now.
Yes.
Today, you will not sit as a doctor.
Today, I'm not sitting as a doctor.
Which definition do you, or which space do you want to sit today? I'm hoping one of them will be a co-host.
Today I'm here because I am the convener of a committee in KCPF we call the Governance Accountability Program. And Governance Accountability Program is about holding leadership to account. It's been an interesting journey, Edmund. I started off just worrying about the loss of life of a child through induced abortion. Then discovered you cannot save the baby unless you save the mother from the situation of the crisis pregnancy. Then you discover you can't solve crisis pregnancy unless you bring in the man. Mm-hmm. And then you discover the reason there is a challenge is because the family is disintegrating. And you follow that back and you discover the economy is a major issue. And therefore, governance then becomes the key thing. If we don't sort out governance, everything else we're worried about becomes a challenge. So that is the program that we are running. We know that in governance, for good governance to happen, you need the state to do its business. And very importantly, you need the people to engage. You need the people to engage with government, to elect people of good standing and to hold them to account throughout their term in office so that whether they are good or bad, they actually produce good fruit. So that's the hat I'm wearing today. And Bernard is a member of that committee, among others. And today he'll be taking us through a lot of the little nitty-gritties, the hidden issues that bring us to illegal debt.
Wonderful. Now, Bernard, if I may start with you. We keep hearing there's a ballooning national debt. And out there, why should the ordinary citizens who we keep calling Wanjiku care about how the government borrows?
You see, we start by talking about the government. What's a government? Mm-hmm. It's individuals elected by Kenyans. Kenyans are the shareholders of the country. And what they do is they elect people, president, MPs, senators, governors, MCAs, to learn their government. And learning the government using the script they have given out. That is the Constitution. Now, these people are supposed to manage their resources, just like any other company. When you elect directors, what is their role? Is to manage the resources. And fortunately for the Wajiko, he has defined the governance in the Constitution. And he has given them the guidelines in the Constitution to use. Any government is established to mobilize revenue or money from the public to fund their common economic projects. Now, the issue is this, the thing is, they do not establish a government to go and borrow to come and fund their activities. That is not what they do. What happens is that they are supposed to manage whatever resources, because if you go out there borrowing, you mean you are borrowing other people's money, but the same Wajiko will repay. So really, and that's the reason why I'm very much against when I hear donor-funded projects. They are not donor-funded. They are Wajiko-funded. Because finally, are they giving us the money to, free? No. You will repay. Now you can see now after borrowing actually means taxing in advance. You see? Because now what will repay this money is the taxes. So when you are borrowing, when you go to China and borrow, you are taxing Wajiko in advance. And that's the reason why Wajiko must be much aware. And that's the reason why the Constitution says that it must be approved by Wajiko. Any borrowing. Where does the Wajiko approve the borrowing? In the budget. You see? So now, when you go borrowing without Wajiko approving, what do you call that one? It's not for Wajiko.
It's illegal.
And that is where we are saying illegal. That's what we're calling odious. When you go borrowing, which has not been approved by Wajiko, because all the projects are in the budget. If you go to Article 220, sub-Article 1A, it defines what is a budget. That is, Wajiko has defined what is a budget under that provision of the Constitution. Define the budget as the estimates of revenue and the expenditure under 220 sub-Article 1A. Revenue is what? Where do we get revenue? From taxes. Where do we get taxes? Who do we tax?
That's Wajiko.
It's Wajiko, isn't it? So what is telling you, you tax Wajiko so much, then expend so much. The estimates of revenue are to fund the expenditure. For that matter, you are not supposed to budget more than what Wajiko can afford. Yeah? So now when you look at it over time, they have actually taxed Wajiko more than the project. If you go to the same Constitution under Article 220, sub-Article 1B, because we just quote it verbatim, it says that the budget of a national accounting government shall contain, A means shall contain estimate of revenue and expenditure. B means shall contain proposals for financing the anticipated deficit. If you look at those two provisions of the Constitution, and they will see what is happening. They are violating those two. Because the first one is talking about estimate of revenue, which is coming from the Wajiko. In the event does not cover the expenditure, B says you must, in the budget, propose how you are going to finance the deficit.
Yes.
That is where you now can bring the loan. Yeah, but it's not necessary. No, the Constitution cannot say go and get a loan. Getting a loan from where? So now that's why you call deficit financing under Article 220, Sub-Article 1B. You can decide to sell KICC and cover the deficit. It's not necessary that you should go and borrow. So now you can only borrow for that deficit. So what has happened? You have borrowed more than that.
Now, you're touching on, clearly, we can all admit and agree that we have a debt crisis in Kenya. So what, if you could look in the rearview mirror and the history and causes of Kenya's debt crisis over time, journey us through that. And I'm glad the supreme law, the Constitution, is there that will guide the frameworks for borrowing. And
yes, maybe
you can touch on that.
Yes, before we go to the very technical issues. As Bernard has explained, and it was very fascinating to hear this as a layman, him explaining the budget process.
Yes.
And you understand that the estimates of revenue will tell you how much the country can afford to spend, and it is going to come from our taxes. And then this is how it is going to be spent. Those are the estimates of expenditure. Now, the estimates of revenue have not been presented to the public for the last year. And if you understand that that is where the borrowing is done, if it is not presented to Parliament so that the relevant committee of Parliament can expose it to us, people, during public participation, then it means it was hidden from the public. And any loan that is hidden and then it is borrowed by government without approval of Parliament, that's what we are saying is illegal.
Right.
Because it wasn't approved.
Mm-hmm.
So the cumulative is Bernard will give us, but it is 6 point what? The cumulative debt.
Yes.
Is 6 point.
The outstanding debt up to now, up to December, is 10.9 trillion. That is the outstanding debt. You see, now, as he said, we only borrow for development.
Exactly.
That is the law. Section 15, subsection 2C of the PFM Act. We only borrow for development. Now, if you look at, we have an outstanding debt of 10.9 for that's 11 years. But the development in the development expenditure budget is only 6.9 trillion there, around that, approximating that figure. So now, you see, we have an outstanding debt of 11 of 11. And the entire project we have, because the development expenditure is where we have all the projects, development projects. That's why we but in the development expenditure budget, we also show the borrowings, what we call pre-negotiated borrowings. You go to that budget book, you'll find that IMF will loan us so much for this project. specifically for project. So you look at, you have the aggregate of all those years. It's around 2.9. That's what we can call as authorized by Wajiko.
So even if you're generous and round it to 3,
Yes,
there is that difference.
there's that difference.
So who should cater for it, and must we? That's the big question.
That should be catered by the borrowers and the lenders.
Yes.
Because even the lenders are supposed to know that they are not dealing with, for example, the president or the minister of finance. Those are representative of the Kenyan people, citizens. And they work under instructions from the citizens as provided in the Constitution. And everybody who is dealing with Kenya must understand what is the requirement of the Kenyan citizens, which is in the Constitution of the PMM Act. So when you are lending money to somebody, and that to come and finance a project which is not in the budget, you are also guilty.
Yes.
Yes. And therefore, if the Kenyans say we are only going to pay what is in the budget,
What is authorized?
what is authorized, then the thing is, whoever borrowed and you colluded with him to give loans which are not in the budget, then it is not the Kenyans to pay.
No.
Yes.
Now, there is development, there is consumption. Just for clarity,
Yes.
asking for a friend.
Yes.
What's the difference when you say, and is there a ratio within which, I'm looking at the typical pay slip which has been rated so much, and there's a limit to how much can be taken, beyond which then it becomes even illegal, even you as an employer. So what should be the ratio of development vis-a-vis consumption, or enlighten us?
Yeah. In the fiscal responsibility principle, which is provided under section 15 subsection 2, it's 15 subsection 2, you are required to have a ratio of 1/3 to 2/3, 1/3 development, 2/3 recurrent. And you know, recurrent is not financed from loans.
From loans.
Its current is financed from the taxpayers. Therefore, we cannot have a deficit in the recurrent expenditure. We can only have a deficit in the development expenditure. Because you see, you cannot go borrowing money from Chinese or from America or from Europe to come and finance your police or your salaries. Yeah,
A holiday.
or holidays on a name. You say, or training your own people. And you know the word development expenditure is defined by law, by the Public Finance Management Act. If you go to section 2, subsection 1, it defines development as creation of asset or renewal of asset. Creation of asset or renewal of asset. So if you borrow to finance anything else, it is illegal. Therefore, even those borrowings which have gone for training, capacity building, because there are many, those are all illegal borrowings. So we can also add them to the odious debts.
Now, interesting you say that, because I've also had the term budgeted corruption, where there is development that I can see, feel, and touch. But that in itself, how it was acquired, something didn't quite go right. And the examples I've had, I hold brief for nobody here. I've heard of Eurobond 1, Eurobond 2, SGR, now we're extending The first one still have issues. So are we likely to get into the same quagmire, as it were?
That's right. That's true. I did an audit on SGR, Standard Gauge Railway. And that is not a public project. I have written a report. I have sent to all offices, Cabinet Secretary, Treasury, Attorney General. I have done a petition to Parliament. I have given those copies to Auditor General, Control Budget, ministers in the transport. None of them has actually commented. So silence means what?
Consent, they accept.
Consent. So confidently I can say that my report was factual because I actually did the audit report from the financial statements, audited financial statement. Audited financial statement. Those are the ones I was actually analyzing from the fraud perspective. So you find now the SGR was actually a PPP, public-private partnership, and a turnkey contract. A turnkey is a contract where the contractor undertakes to develop the project and finally give you, when it is complete, use his own money, wherever he is going to get it. Either he uses equity or he borrows, but he is the borrower, not the government. Finally, it will bring a key to the government to turn on. It's a matter of how they is going to recoup his investment. In the turnkey contract, they do agree it is stipulated in the conditions. And the only way to recoup his investment is to share either the whole revenue being generated from that asset or a part of it.
Part of it, partially, yes.
That's the only way to. But you know now, in the third contract, they added a rider. It's called turnkey commercial contract. And from where I stand as a fraud expert, that we don't have such a kind of a contract. They ended commercial contract to bring in the government to be the borrower. It's a fraud scheme. Because you don't have a contract called a turnkey commercial contract. Because when it is a commercial contract now, it means the employer is going to finance, and that's how we found ourselves with this loan, SGR loan. So the issue is this: when we are extending, and we have not solved this problem, and my petition is in Parliament. It has been there for the last 1 year. I said it to the National Assembly and the Senate. And I've even written another reminder. They have kept quiet. They should reply to me and tell me this is nonsense or something like that, because I interpreted the official document. So they should tell me whether I misinterpreted or something like that. But now they have kept quiet. I mean, my report is factual.
No wonder then the contract that was supposed to be made public has never been, because then it was just qualified.
There was no contract in the first place. Why? Because by then we had Disposal Act, and we had only 7 procurement agreements. You know, this was following and the specially permitted procurement method, where there was concession. And the concession was heaved out of there, and they made now the PPP Act. All public contracts are supposed to be published, by both the procuring entity, and then we had the Public Procurement Oversight Authority. Today is the PPR, Public Procurement and Regulatory Authority. They were supposed to publish, in the newspapers and what have you. So there was no publication of that contract because there was no contract in the first place. Again, the procuring entity, which was the Kenya Railway Corporation, they are supposed to keep in custody for more than 6 years all the procurement proceedings. 6 years. But if there is a dispute, until the dispute is solved. So I tried to look for all those documents for publication or whatever. There was nothing. There was no public process the way it was. It's unfortunate that our Supreme Court, in their ruling of the Umutata case, they came with a very, very, very interesting observation that this was a government-to-government contract. I tried to look for a contract between China government, because that is the government, and Kenya government. There's no such kind of a contract. I think there was imaginary. And that really, it is null and void. Because, the courts do make law, case law, isn't it? So when this Supreme Court makes such kind of a case law, which is in conflict with the Constitution, and the Constitution and Section 2 clearly expresses itself that anything in conflict with the Constitution is null and void to the extent of that. So if the Supreme Court makes a law, or rather declares that this was a government to government, which is in conflict with the Constitution.
Constitution is supreme.
The Constitution is supreme, and it has expressed itself. So you don't need a judge to come and say it was null and void. Yes, the Constitution has itself.
So then, has Parliament failed in its oversight role?
Completely. I don't have any completely.
Well,
In fact, Edmund, if we just go back to the happenings of
Yes.
last year, around the time of budget making,
Yes.
you can't have a better example of Parliament abdicating than that one. The whole country went up for them not to pass that finance bill.
Yes.
Everybody was asking. People went to the streets, and they went ahead and passed that bill. And then when the heat was raised a little more, it is the president who then decided not to sign the finance bill. You remember?
Yes, and then all clubs.
And all of them clapped and actually went back to Parliament and rejected that bill. You don't need any other example to tell you that our representatives are not representing us.
No.
Yes. Parliament abdicated. And right now, as we see it in black and white, Parliament is serving the interest of the executive. Yes.
Now, Bernard, can a government commit future generations to unapproved debt? I just did a quick search. 10.8, 10.9, call it 11 trillion current population. We all owe at least 200,000 shillings.
Even the newborn.
And the ones who are yet to come.
Why did we elect a government? If you go back, what we say,
Yes.
you elect a government to manage our resources. And the main policy document is the budget. The budget, that's where we have, that is our wealth. The budget represents our wealth. That's why you have all the projects you require in the budget. It's not outside the budget. If you look at it, who approves the budget?
Parliament.
It's Parliament. It is not the president. This is why I actually ask this question when I hear people saying, or the MP telling us, you stay in the government so that you can get development. Have you heard that?
Keep hearing it.
Keep hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
What does those MPs tell us? They ousted
Surely.
our government. They actually did a coup d'etat.
Mm-hmm.
Because I elected the MP to go and represent me in the Parliament to ensure that in my constituency, development expenditure has been approved in Parliament. The project I want in my constituency is going there to make sure that they are included in the budget. You see, we talk about legislating, oversight, isn't it?
Yes, and representation.
Sometimes I wonder whether they understand what that means. You know why? It's because now, if all the projects,
Yes.
if all the projects are in the budget, you see. Now, when he's coming to tell me to stay in which government, it is my government.
It is.
Isn't it? So does it mean that when I elected the MP, he actually overturned my government? So then now he's telling me, look here, you must support the government so that I can bring development. So that the president can come and bring the development. The president does not have any development.
No.
The person who has got the development is the MP. In fact, the president should beg the MP to pass any project he wants, not the other way around.
It just seems like there is a failure of our leadership to transition from the old constitution to the 2010 constitution. Because previously then it is the government, the state was basically the sovereign. The presidents would tell us what they will do. They would keep referring to my government. 2010 that changed, and we, the people, then became the sovereign and delegated authority to the parliament, to the judiciary and to the executive. But our leadership have not transitioned, and they are still in that old dispensation where they actually believe the state holds resources. And there is a lot of need for civic education, even starting with our own parliamentarians, even before we deal with the rest of us.
I like that. And as always, when you have a topic such as this that is very current and definitely not going anytime soon, we'll wind up. But let me ask Bernard, what's the one thing that you say we must do as a citizenry, as a nation, in this process now that we're in the finance bill process of making? What's that one-liner you can have as a call to action?
One thing is we should follow the Constitution. For example, you have talked about the finance bill. The finance bill is not a constitution requirement. It is a PFM requirement. Recently, we heard that the cabinet passed the finance bill. The finance bill is revenue raising measures. Which revenue? People should ask themselves, which revenue? The revenue you're referring to is under Article 220, Sub-Article 1, where it is defined the budget shall contain estimate of revenue and expenditure. That side of estimate of revenue is the one the finance bill feeds, because finance bill only contains amendments to the tax acts in itself is not a tax act. It is an omnibus proposals to amend the tax acts. And remember, only amendments, it contains only an amendment. For example, you may have a tax like corporate tax, which is 30%. Now, the Finance Act bill will only come up if you want to increase or reduce the tax act. And by the way, you can amend any tax act without a finance bill itself. And we have done it several times. You don't need, this is only, you have bringing all of them together. Instead of bringing one by one, you bring it all together under Finance Act. So now, the cabinet passed the finance bill. Yet, the budget, estimates of revenue, are not.
Still in the very dark gray area.
Yes. So, you know, there was attempt, or they changed the finance PFM Act, very unconstitutional. Because now, if you pass the finance bill, and then you go and adjust the estimate of revenue, you know what I mean?
The cheeky way of doing this.
He's working backwards.
Because in the process of the budget process, you may adjust the expenditure together with the estimate of revenue. Then you're supposed to adjust the rates contained in the finance bill.
And Dr. Home, as you bring that one-liner,
Yes.
I looked at Proverbs 22:7 that says the borrower is slave to the lender.
The borrower is slave to the lender, and it cannot be more true. And that is why, as a citizens of this country, being the sovereign, we now must take charge. Our parliamentarians have failed us. What we are asking through the Governance Accountability Program, together with the Governance Accountability Movement, which involves all Kenyans of goodwill, is that this time round, we must demand that the government follows the law in formulating the budget. And the one thing that all Kenyans must ask for is the estimates of revenue together with the estimates of expenditure. Because the estimates of revenue disclose the borrowing, and it is the borrowing that will cause our pain through taxation. So that's what we must see. And since it has never been presented before, what they play around with is that finance bill. I would wish all Kenyans would understand from where Bernard has brought us that we should ignore the finance bill and insist on seeing the estimates of revenue, and that those estimates of revenue are subjected to public participation so that we agree and we scrutinize whether there is borrowing and whether that borrowing is linked to development, and even more important, whether the borrowing is within our means. One thing that shocked me is that what the proposed budget from what is coming from the cabinet is about 4.3 trillion. And Bernard has done analysis on our incomes from tax revenue, and on average, we are able to raise 2.2 trillion. That's the realistic amount of money Kenya can raise. Now, if you come up with a budget of 4.3 trillion and you can only raise 2.2, then you are telling us you're going to borrow 1.2 or 2.1 trillion, isn't it? They've already told us before we even look at the papers. Then the other part of the budget that we'd be interested in is, because the budget is developed by the line ministries and those other government organs, that is where we would need to go and interrogate and find out from the revenue estimates. How did you come up with a budget that is supposed to spend 1.5 billion on other expenses in State House, for instance?
Yeah.
Yes. So
one quick
more
liner.
thing is that, they bring, the 1.5 billion, 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 1.5 billi the appropriation. They claim that they must pass the Appropriation Act before that June. And therefore, that is the reason why now they give very little time for
interrogation.
people to interrogate. The Constitution has given a leeway if the Appropriation Act will not be financed by, finalized by 30th June. Under Article 222, the government is allowed to use half of the estimated revenue, estimated expenditure before the passing of the, if the Appropriation Act will not have been passed by 30th June. So this question of telling us that they must pass it by 30th June so that they cannot give us enough time to interrogate the budget is actually trying to...
I think it's selling fear and blackmail.
Yes,
Yes,
so that
so-
we are not, not
Mm.
interrogated properly.
So just to conclude, a KCPF has petitioned Parliament
Yes.
to this time follow the Constitution.
Follow the Constitution.
And this petition was given to Parliament on the 29th, one day before the process starts, just to tell the government that round here tuko macho. Yes, and we are calling on anybody of goodwill to look out for the online signature collection in support of the petition. It is not necessary for the petition to go through, but it's just a demonstration of solidarity and also an item of civic education.
Others and journey together, and that's our contribution in empowering you, the citizen out there, in matters breaking the chains of illegal debts. Asante sana, Bernard.
Thank you.
Been a pleasure. Daktari, as always, my name is Edmund Mdibo. We don't take the privilege of your time for granted. Stay tuned, stay well, stay safe. God bless.